Hello, I am Jan Reardon, and I am a very proud board member and volunteer for the Jennifer Reardon Foundation. Jennifer is my sister-in-law, and my brother created the foundation to honor her in many ways, and the main form of admiration is to keep her mantra of being kind, loving, caring, and sharing going for generations to come, and so far so good. Their children are certainly very kind, loving, caring, and sharing, and all of us that know them well share that with them. The 4 pillars of the foundation is what we focus in on this show that Town Meeting TV is generously allowing us to do on a monthly basis. And the 4 pillars are women's empowerment, early childhood education, financial literacy, and community vitality. And we tend to do quite a bit, thankfully, here in Vermont with community vitality. We have more nonprofits per capita than any other state in the United States. So to be able to bring leaders in from different organizations always makes me feel so wonderful to know what's happening here in Vermont and ways to get more Vermonters involved. And today I have the pleasure of really getting to know this individual a little bit more. He has an amazing reputation. I'm very familiar with many of the things that he has accomplished in his role as the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association for the Vermont chapter right here in Williston. So we're very fortunate today to have Howard Goodrow here. I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you, Jan. It's great to be here.
Truly appreciate you being here. And just getting to know you a little bit more. We have a couple of mutual friends, so I do know many of the great things that you have done and a lot about you and your beautiful family. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
And we certainly want to really spread the word on a lot. You know, what's nice is there's a lot of progress being made. It's not like we're talking about, I mean, there's obviously plenty of needs, but we have a lot of good things that we'll be able to discuss as far as some of the milestones that have been accomplished along the way. So if you would begin, Howard, just by sharing the mission of your organization and maybe how that might vary a little bit here in Vermont versus the national level, if it's tweaked in any way. I know you have a great affiliation with the organizations here in New England too, so that's very powerful. But just share a little bit about your mission overall.
Well, in the grand scheme, it's not, you don't have to tweak it anywhere. The mission is really to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia. There are more words to it, but that's the mission.
Love it.
If we boil it down. Vermont's no different than any of the other 74 chapters, 75 chapters across the country. We happen to be the second smallest chapter in the country behind Wyoming. So we take some pride in our successes here.
Exactly, rightfully so.
But we are, the relationship kind of between the national organization and the chapters is symbiotic in many ways. They're kind of the air cover, if you will.
Right.
They also put policies in place. They do a lot of the HR things and the things that you need to send a little money to
Right.
fund.
How about on the advocacy level? Do you see that more national, or is that even more
Both.
local and regional? All of the above?
It's all of the above. I was just in DC 2 weeks ago for our advocacy forum. We had 1,100 volunteers and staff from across the country turning the Capitol purple.
Yeah, I love
We
it.
all had
I
our
love it.
purple
I was so
sash
glad
and
that we
purple
would have
outfits.
our
Yeah,
exactly.
that's very exciting. But that was a fantastic event. We meet with every legislator in the country.
And what were the big topics this year? Can you narrow it down, or is it pretty broad?
Funding is always a
Sure.
big one. We're looking for $113 million additional dollars to NIH, which is a tricky topic these days, but that's the ask. And the other two, basically, one is a blood test that we'll talk about, I'm sure, a little later when we get to the research side of things. But
Perfect.
Trying to make sure that gets approval for funding, so through Medicaid, Medicare.
Right.
So we want to kind of get to that before it becomes an issue, so we don't have to fight for it after it's already approved. And then the other thing is dollars for training primary care physicians.
Love it. That's
So often-
something I wanted to ask you about, so I'm glad you brought that up.
So
right?
often physicians that just simply don't have the training in Alzheimer's disease or dementia, how to recognize it.
Differentiate between the various
differentiate it.
types. I don't think,
Yeah.
myself included, really not until recently to know not just the stages, but the differences that exist.
A lot of people get confused about it, and they hear Alzheimer's and they hear dementia, and they
think it's the same.
what is different? How do they relate?
Right.
So again, in simple terms, dementia is the umbrella, and about 70% of all dementias are Alzheimer's.
Right.
And the other 30% are various forms of dementia.
And how would it vary? Give like maybe one example of how, if you're not in that percent that would be with Alzheimer's, but you have dementia, what would be a variable of that?
There are different behavioral issues. Aggression sometimes is stronger in some of the dementias. So things like that. But the key is Alzheimer's is defined by these things called plaques and tangles in the brain. And if they can be identified
Earlier,
is we can get rid of them, and maybe we can treat them early before symptoms even show up and push the disease off a number of years, which is the ultimate goal.
And obviously all the research up to this point has been leading to having that discussion in DC, knowing how critical that will be. And at what point, say the funding goes through and everything is approved, as it hopefully will be, at what point would somebody be able to, that would be a standard blood test?
Yes. So the blood test right now just got approved by the FDA a month ago.
Fabulous.
So it's only being used in clinical work right now. It's not being used at a doctor's office.
Right.
But ultimately, that's the goal.
And do you think that's something that would be within the next couple of years?
Yes, absolutely.
Fabulous. So it's really tangible.
Again, they're saying that the plaques and tangles start to develop 20 years or so before you have a symptom. So I like to think of it this way. It's kind of like a statin.
Right.
Or could act as a statin. So if we now have two drugs that push off the progression of the disease by about 35%, which is pretty dramatic for folks with the disease and their caregivers. So if we can
start to... And how long has that drug been in circulation?
One has been there for about 2 years, the other about a year.
So they're fabulous.
Called Leqembi and Kisunla. They never give these things easy names.
I know, right?
So they're less complicated than the original name, but
yes,
that's what they do now. So those were used in clinical trials. I was just actually at the advocacy forum. I was with a gentleman from Maine who just ran the Boston Marathon about 3 weeks ago. He's in his mid-70s, I believe. He started on a clinical trial 10 years ago for Leqembi. He has not noticed any change in his cognitive behavior.
Everything stopped in its tracks right there.
Stopped.
And he went for that clinical trial because he was...
He had been diagnosed.
He was diagnosed.
He went
and then
for
it
the
didn't
clinical
progress.
trial, did not progress. Of course, he changed his lifestyle as well. So he
what
wasn't
way?
necessarily a runner. He didn't eat all that well, but he decided, I'm going to change some things. Since that time, we have determined that roughly 40% of all dementias are preventable.
40%?
Based on our decisions, our choices.
Right.
Clearly, I've made a lot of bad ones.
Okay, let me just make a little note of that.
That aside.
That is remarkable, though.
So we talk about how the heart and brain are so connected. So if you take care of your heart, you drastically improve how your brain's going to react and progress. So diet, exercise, don't smoke, don't drink, be in the public. Don't shut yourself off, which is a big one.
Right, and I was thinking about that just, still coming off the heels of the pandemic and what that did to so many different, people, and certainly with this, group, that isolation just, as you say, it just, makes things worse.
Yeah, it
absolutely
devastated
it's good that that's being
folks.
emphasized to be more social.
Yeah. So there's actually a study that's going to be presented at the end of July at our Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which, if anyone ever has the chance to go to this, it's unbelievably inspiring.
Let us know a little bit about this here. I want to make some notes. So what is
it's the
date?
Alzheimer's
July.
Association International Conference.
Okay.
It's the last week in July. I don't have the
Okay,
specific
the last week
dates
in
right now, but
July.
it's the last.
And where
last
will
week.
that be held?
This year it's in Toronto.
Very nice.
It was in Philadelphia last year, and San Diego the year before, and Finland. It's all over the place. So it rotates back and forth between an international location.
it's always
and
it's an
in the
annual
United
event.
States. It's
So
an annual
once a year.
event. So I've been 2 or 3 times, and it's amazing because I sit in a room, aside from the fact that I feel really underqualified to be in that room because it's mostly scientists and researchers, 6,000 people in the room, all dedicated to this disease. It's absolutely
Powerful.
inspiring.
Oh,
And then we've got another 6,000 or 7,000 people participating online. So 12,000 people, give or take.
especially honed in on the research side of
All
things
honed
and
in on
look at the results that have been, the outcomes that have
Yeah.
been taking place within the last couple of years.
Right. When I started 5 years ago, it was still, there was hope. It was like,
Right.
we'll get there at some point. And then there started
wasn't
being
anything
rumors
tangible.
about these
Right.
medicines that might do something. They might be productive. And then 3 years ago, we had the first one that was approved by the FDA, and that's kind of been overshadowed by the other 2, so they kind of put that one off to the side. But the other 2 have been remarkable for a certain subset of people. It's not for everybody. It's for people who are early on in their diagnosis and meet certain criteria, but it's a start. It got a lot of criticism at first because it focused primarily on those plaques and tangles that we talked about,
Right.
eliminating them basically. And people said, well, that's not the only thing. There are other factors. There are other things that determine whether you have the disease. Some people can have the plaques and tangles and not have the disease, but
Oh, that's interesting.
or never
right.
develop it.
Right. But it's certainly a significant piece.
It's a
that
significant
needs to-
piece.
right.
And the
be
reality
pursued.
is, people say we focus too much on that, but the reality is
Look at the results.
17% of our research goes to that. The rest is in all these other areas that I'm not qualified to talk about.
Right, right.
But some of them are lifestyle choices, some of them are medical, some of them are, the blood-brain barrier. How can we get more quickly to the brain and more directly instead of having to go through the blood system and all of that. So
And these medications, they came as a result of the clinical trials. Were they studies that took
well,
place?
they were studies. They were developed by pharmaceutical companies, and then they made it to the clinical trial stage.
Right.
And then they showed great potential in
So
those.
are there trials that are still underway?
There are, I'm going to get the number wrong, but there are, I think, somewhere in the 40 trials right now.
And that's all like
underway
the
at
different aspects.
different stages.
Right, right. That's the interesting part, unfortunately, as well as fortunately about the disease is the complexity of it. And obviously being able to look at all the different factors versus some other disease where it might be a little bit more straightforward.
Right. So the study that I mentioned is going to be presented at AAIC is a 2-year study. It's called the Pointer Study. It's based off a study in Finland that they did a number of years ago called the Finger Study. So we figured we'd narrow it down and make it a Pointer Study.
It's nice that it's not an acronym at least to have to deal with, right? So what does that mean?
It's basically taking a look at lifestyle choices. They've separated the group into a control group where they are actively monitoring and working with individuals on their diet, their exercise, how much activity they're getting, whether they're getting stimulation from tests and things like that. And then there's another group that they're saying, here's the stuff, go do it.
You're on your own.
You're on your own, basically.
And at what point of that study are we right now?
It's done.
Oh, it's done.
So we're just
So the results
so
will
the
be
results will be presented in July. So that will be big to really
Huge.
push out the
next
behavioral
step.
things.
Exactly.
I mentioned to you earlier before we were on that I worked for the Cancer Society for 18 years. I feel like we're at a similar inflection point with the Alzheimer's Association, because when I started at ACS, it was a time when the disease was people were just starting to be comfortable saying, I have the disease. instead of hiding it.
True.
And kind of backing off away from society.
Right. Interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up.
It was also a time where there weren't a lot of treatments. That obviously has changed dramatically from a cancer perspective. So I think we're kind of at that point right now where people are now starting to come out and they're talking about it and they're not ashamed of it. It's a disease that for decades has been associated with shame. There's no reason for that.
Not at all.
Nobody's done anything to put themselves in this position. It's just a dreaded disease.
Exactly, and as we said earlier, either you are affected by it or someone you know and love is affected. It's just one of those unfortunate diseases that hopefully will not be as prevalent in the very near future even as it is now. And that's what's so wonderful to hear you talk about, these tangible things that are happening and have happened that have led to such success.
I lost my mother 2 years ago with dementia. When I started 5 years ago, she hadn't been diagnosed. So I didn't have a strong connection to the disease at that point. I had lost an aunt, but not a real close.
Right.
But it becomes real very fast.
Oh, and to really understand, but you think you know what it is, but as there's so many variables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in Vermont, are there studies that are going, any clinical trials?
We don't have any. Good or bad, I think it's good. The association goes out and finds the best research that is being done in the world.
Right.
We're on all 6 continents right now. We have programs going on. Trying to think the number of countries we're in. Doesn't matter, but it's a lot.
Right.
But Vermont, for some reason, we haven't had a lot of applicants, which we're trying to push that a little bit more.
And again, that could be people just not feeling comfortable coming forward. And I know, obviously, with the events that you do, and obviously the need for fundraising and funding in general, that's a way to get more people involved. And I know Kevin will be able to get the number up on the screen as far as getting volunteer support and finding out a little bit more about the events that take place in this area, which are just so wonderful to be a part of in any capacity, whether you're there as a participant or volunteering. But I've been at the walks, and the energy and the power is, it's so inspirational. Yeah. And you leave kind of feeling a different person. Yeah. You really do get a much better sense of the needs and the fact that, we're all here together. This is a great community, and to see that kind of, outpour, and to have an event that's, 12,000, scientists all gathered together talking about different things, and having all of the leaders of the, chapters there is, we're very fortunate to have people like yourself, Howard, in your capacity to be able to bring this to Vermont and be able to educate the people here to know what to do. I mean, lifestyle changes, even though it makes sense for anything to obviously lead a healthy life, I would not have thought that could have made a difference at all in this particular disease as it may in others. And just that in itself is a great takeaway. Just
and
for
that's
people.
Almost the identical statistic that when I was at the Cancer Society, they determined that was kind of the same 40 to 50% is preventable.
Right.
But
and thankfully, again, just getting back to, heart health and how that plays a part in every other organ in our body, and they all have to start talking to each other in there, so you want that to be as clear as it can be.
Yeah, and that's why I think we talk to a certain demographic a lot. We talk to people 45 and older a lot. We need to start talking to people 15 and older.
Exactly.
And start putting these practices in place and say,
lifestyle.
This is how you need to live your life if you want to be healthy. You see what's happening to your grandparents. You see what's happening to your parents in some cases.
That's so true.
Don't let that happen to you. You can do a lot to prevent that. So that's a message we really need to get out. Definitely,
and just to really appeal to that younger, demographic, as you say, just to certainly make a difference in the future. It's fabulous that all this is happening, but it's a lot of money that's going in and being needed for the research. And so obviously to start seeing some of those numbers diminish as far as the number of people that we need to, care for, that is only going to help the entire, world.
And Vermont is the second or third oldest state in the country, depending on who you ask.
Right, so the number...
So our numbers aren't going down.
Right.
And that's concerning. We have a a woeful shortage of geriatricians in the state. And that's probably part of why we don't get a lot of requests for funding for research, because they just simply don't have the time to do the research. They would love to do the research.
Sure.
But they don't have the time. And, people are waiting a year to get diagnosed with this disease. And
how much can happen in a year's time?
Exactly. I mentioned the kind of qualifications for those drugs. You can age out of those where you fall in the disease, so you're no longer eligible. I was with a woman down in D.C., one of our advocates was with us. Her dad was diagnosed at 50, but it was during COVID. So he wasn't able to to see if he was qualified for the drug until after COVID, and he had already progressed beyond the point where it could help him.
So what is the window for that particular drug? Is it within a year's time?
Depends.
Right.
It depends on how,
person.
yeah. Everybody, they say if you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's.
That's right.
They're just so different, and people progress differently. But it's definitely in that early stage.
It's so critical, right, to be able to implement any changes, whether it be medication or back to the lifestyle during that time.
And that's where the blood test might come in.
Right, exactly. And then would you say 50 is early, like the early onset? Is that about the age where you hear that, or is it ever any younger than that?
It's funny you ask that, because the statistics you look at, when we say we've got 13,000 people in Vermont who have Alzheimer's disease, that's 13,000 people 65 and older. Doesn't count anybody under the age of 65.
Right, which
and we know
there
that
has
number
to be
goes
a
way up.
significant number.
Not to mention the people who are 65 and older who haven't been diagnosed because they won't go to the doctor, or they can't get an appointment, or they live in a very rural area. So it's a skewed number.
Absolutely.
I was at a recent conference, and they said they were talking about a gentleman who died at 29 from Alzheimer's. So it can get you really at any time, unfortunately.
Right, and I never would have known that.
No. That number shocked me.
Absolutely, because 50 is what I had heard. Like when I had first heard that, I was shocked to believe that somebody at 50 could. But
I think the bottom line is, if you start to notice things,
regardless of age,
start asking questions, and very much so, you need to advocate for yourself, especially women. Women have to advocate for themselves more than men anyway, in every aspect of life. But when you go to the doctor, they definitely have to do that.
Sure.
And the disease impacts them more. It impacts women, it impacts African American, it impacts Hispanics more so than white men.
Did not realize that.
Yeah, and all three of those have challenges when it comes to the medical community. Whether it's, I don't trust them, or they don't believe me, or, whatever that case may be. They're
feel a disadvantage in some ways. I haven't asked you any of these questions. This has just been so great to talk. But let's see, we have 5 more minutes, so I want to make sure I get down through a few of these questions here. But as far as, like in Vermont, we have the walk coming up.
Yep.
And that is, what is the date on that? Because I just wanted to.
So we have 4 walks. We've got one in the Champlain Valley at the museum, the Shelburne Museum.
Right.
That's on September 28th. Then on September 27th, we have our Rutland Walk.
Okay.
And the Northeast Kingdom is on September 21st. And
September's a little bit.
I'm going forward
You're
now.
right,
we have one in late October.
September's a little busy for you.
We have one in late October in the Upper Valley.
Very nice.
Down in Lebanon.
And what are the numbers? Like, do they, tend to all be pretty much the same?
So
for
Champlain
size?
Valley, in terms of dollars or people?
How much people and dollars that are raised would be great.
So Champlain Valley brings in about 800 people and raises just over $200,000. The Upper Valley Walk brings in about 500 to 600 people. Fabulous. And raises just about the same amount, right around 200,000. Mm-hmm. Rutland is, rebirthing itself, if you will. It had a few down years, but they're up in the 250 to 300 person range. Good. At $65,000. And then the Northeast Kingdom, which is the little engine that could, I don't understand how they do it, but they're a remarkable community. They raise $100,000,
With how many people?
give or take, and they probably have 450 people, 500 people
That's
show up.
impressive.
What's special about that event is the academy, St. Johnsbury Academy,
Yes.
and the local high schools come out, and all the athletes come.
A lot of teams.
And they all show up in their jerseys
Yes,
and
wow,
they
that's
walk,
a lot of
and it
spirit.
just brings a different kind of tone to the event with
right.
the youth aspect of it. So.
That energy is very exciting.
And they're all so different. I mean, Champlain Valley's at the museum, so it's gorgeous. The museum's great. They let people stick around and enjoy the grounds afterwards.
Right, that was the one I attended, and I really enjoyed it. It was so inspirational.
Yep.
And again, we have the website that has been going there. So for people to go to the website and look at the Vermont chapter, everything is listed there. You know, it's a great website to be able to look at the resources that are available and the programs that you have in place for just for family members too. Any program in particular that you'd like to highlight, or
I think the
again
programs
to get people to the website?
Yeah, the programs and services are all, like you said, they're outlined on there. But I think what's important is we have things for everybody. We have things for people with the disease. We have a lot of things for caregivers.
Right.
This is a devastating disease on caregivers.
Absolutely.
I can speak through my sister's voice now and say how much it took a toll on her while my mother was going through this.
Right.
It's hard to imagine that it's almost as if you're trapped because you've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't leave people.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
So my plea to everybody out there as a caregiver is, if you have someone who says, "How can I help?" answer the question. If they say, "I want you to go to lunch," I will watch your spouse, your loved one.
Yes.
Go to lunch. You know, those are important things. You need to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your loved one.
Be there for that person that you love.
And that's just so important. I think the other thing, as we kind of run low on time, is just to focus on, we need volunteers.
Right.
I have 6 people, including myself, to cover the entire state through, well, I have 2 development folks who are doing events to try and raise money to stop this thing. I've got 1 program manager, senior program manager, who's trying to cover the entire state and work with volunteers to do education programs and awareness. And I've got a policy director, and then I have an admin staff. But the education piece of it, we need bodies. We need people.
What would be an example, Howard, of something? Say I go, call the number today that's on the site. What would an opportunity look like for me to do? Like, what are some options?
So we have community educators that can be in any town, any community in the state, and really the commitment is 1 program a month. It's an hour. And the program could be healthy living for your brain and body.
Right.
Which goes back to a lot of the things that we've already talked about. Or it could be know the 10 signs of the disease.
And where are these held? Like where? If
They can be held anywhere.
Okay.
A lot of libraries.
We'll donate the space to be
We'll
able.
donate the space,
And
yeah.
do you have 6, 7, 8 people or 20 people that show up? Are they smaller groups?
It varies depending on the town.
topic.
And we also, we would love to do things that bring in 150 people.
Of course.
If we could get, if we could get folks in a room with the right topic, that's the ideal scenario. Generally speaking, we're talking to 8 to 15 people at a time.
Nice size group.
Which is good, because
it's very
at
personal.
least it's personal. They have a
Yes.
chance to ask the questions they want to ask. They feel comfortable because they recognize that other people in the room are in the same situation they're in.
Probably more comfortable and comforting than anything they've experienced in the last period of time, because you go out socially and you try to cover that up, and you don't feel comfortable, and this can take down those barriers as it should.
Yeah, and that's why our support groups are so valuable too. We have over 20 support groups in the state.
And how do the support groups work? Is that in person, or is that through
Both.
technology? A little bit of both.
We have virtual and we have in person. We have 2 co-facilitators, all volunteers, who facilitate these generally hour-long just conversations, so people can come and
that's really what it is. Is just to be able to just have an open discussion.
It's primarily caregivers, for the most part, and it's sharing this experience, getting advice from people. This happened this week. Anybody have any thoughts, ideas? And it's comical because we talked about no Alzheimer's is the same.
That's right.
but the threads through everything, there are a lot of similarities.
I'm sure, just as you say, as far as, and it is changing where it's becoming, easier to talk about with, friends and family, or even if you're concerned about something, you're comfortable to be able to get on the right path, much more so than years ago. But I love the fact that the support groups are something that is sort of informal, so you can go and there's so much commonality, I'm sure, because of those social pieces that you can just feel better about talking with one another, and then that changes what you're able to even do to take initiation to go get some testing. I mean, one thing leads to another so nicely, it just dovetails so well.
Yeah, and you have to find the humor in it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Right.
It's hard, but
Right.
eventually,
But it's a good point.
eventually you get to that point
Yes.
where it's like, okay, you wear your pajamas to the store. I don't
Yeah,
care.
exactly,
It's,
right.
there's-
And who's to say, you know what? Like you say, I mean, truly, who does care?
right.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that humor up, because there are times, and you just you don't know what to do, laugh or cry.
Yeah.
And hey, if you can laugh about it and you're not having any confrontation, that's what it's all about. Just enjoy the time that you have together in whatever way that might look like today versus tonight.
Exactly. Yeah, and the other piece with the trainings is we want to be in corporations. Every large corporation does lunch and learn types of events. We can come and talk to you. It doesn't cost you anything.
That's right.
And I know you need topics, and especially for those companies that are customer facing. So it gives the employees some tools to say, okay, now I recognize it. Here's how I can handle it next time.
Right.
Those-
Before you could
those are
recognize it, didn't
important.
know how to handle it, so then you stop right there, and
So
as
it's
you say, if you have that
important
segue.
It's important for banks and supermarkets and so many different companies. And even those that aren't forward-facing or customer-facing, there are people in the room who are caregivers. And there are people
Absolutely.
who are contemplating, do I have to leave my job to go take care of my family?
Right.
This is an expensive
Life-altering.
disease. This is the most expensive disease out there, because so many
The
people...
impact on
the impact on
the family.
Our-
It's not like you can just juggle it and tweak it and okay, I'll be right back. No, it doesn't
Right.
work that way.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going to be there when you get back.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Right.
I'm thinking I had been the vice president of healthy living at the Greater Burlington YMCA, and I'm thinking they are such a fabulous organization, and a lunch and learn, and to be able to bring people in, I'd love to connect you with.
Yeah, I actually met with
Oh,
the
fabulous.
CEO
Good.
recently, so
I'm
we're
glad to
working
hear it.
on
Yeah,
trying to
that-
get something together.
Yeah, they are such a fabulous organization, and the members themselves as well as the staff. That's a great way to do networking and awareness.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. I don't know. We are wrapping up here, but I have enjoyed this so much. I'm trying to, again, we can't emphasize enough about the volunteers that are needed, and the 800 number is right there on the site, as well as these volunteer opportunities. I can't wait to go and get signed up for something. I'm really looking forward to being involved, Howard. I'm so respectful of you and what you are doing, and the organization, just the Alzheimer's Association, is remarkable to have so much that's tangible. And I know it's not a short period of time, but it sure seems like it. Within the last few years, how many significant changes have taken place.
Yeah, this is my third national organization that I've worked for, the Cancer Society. I worked for the Y for a couple of years down in Hartford, Connecticut.
Very nice. Didn't know that.
But so this is my third, and by far this is the one that I feel is the most closely knit as an organization.
Well, the way you talked
nationally.
about it regionally too.
Nationally
even
and regionally, we are extremely
yes,
close.
and that
so
in
we
itself
work-
is very
We work
powerful.
really well together and do a lot of programs together.
Right.
And just support each other. So
Of course.
it's a great organization. It's been my pleasure to be here for 5 years and
We're
see
lucky to
and
have you.
see
I'm
the
glad you're here in
differences.
Vermont.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to see tangible differences.
Oh, absolutely. Because in many situations, similar to being an executive director in an organization, you don't see those during your tenure. You hope that maybe,
Right.
afterwards things come, but typically, you're not getting to experience some of those instrumental changes like this, and they're so significant. So that has to be so rewarding and keeps you going, because it's a long battle.
Yeah, it
How,
definitely
I mean,
is.
again, that varies too, the length of time. Can that be determined when, say, some of these, like, tests can be done, the blood work? you can't
No.
really say, okay, this is like a 4-year versus a 6-year. No way of knowing.
No, it could be a 2-year process. It could be
Right.
20 years. You just don't know.
No indication of what would make that any different.
Some of it has to do with your overall health.
Sure, other factors.
So if you're really healthy and you get this disease,
Chances are much greater that you're going to be able to
this could be the
manage
disease
it a
that
little
kills
bit.
you.
Right.
My mother got the disease. She was 87. She had something else that ultimately took her, which
That you don't know.
good or bad.
Right.
But, you know, that's
Exactly.
So you just don't know.
And is there even a stat on that as far as how many people typically die of the disease versus something else that was caused as a result of it?
I don't think so.
Right, just-
There are a lot of comorbidity issues.
Right.
There's also a lot of health issues with caregivers.
Absolutely, I would imagine.
And those
That's
increase,
intense.
including depression and mental health issues that creep up as you deal with this. So
Sure.
it's a complicated disease. It's one we're getting our arms around.
Which I love, the fact that, more and more people are learning new things every day just as community members versus, being in that family that is, going through it. It's hopefully reaching out and having more people be there for you.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, Howard.
Thank you, Jan. It's been a
yes,
pleasure.
and I'll look forward to reconnecting here, hopefully, later today or tomorrow, and see what I can do. Certainly on, my little level to help in any way possible, because I certainly am very appreciative of how hardworking you and your team are in this area and throughout the region and nationally.
Thank you,
So-
and thank you for your work with the foundation
thank you.
and everything you do.
Thank you so much.
For our
It's
community.
been, well, I appreciate that. It's been a fun ride. As I mentioned yesterday, I was at a symposium at Lawson's Finest Liquids. Shout out to that organization. They've been very, very generous with many organizations, and I was there with the Vermont Cancer Support Network, and just the networking and the things that we all have in common that we need, and a way to collaborate and streamline some of those things and free us up to do some other things, I think is the future, where that collaboration is what it's all about. And if we can get our organizations, and certainly with the Jennifer Reardon Foundation being so giving, and the mantra of being kind, loving, caring, and sharing, and focusing on those 4 pillars, whatever we can do as an organization, I certainly want to be very supportive of the work that you are doing.
Well, you mentioned it at the very onset of our talk, which is we have more nonprofits in
Per
Burlington
capita
than any other
in
place
the
other than
United
Washington,
States.
D.C. I think Washington, D.C. has
Oh,
us beat, but they're not a state. So
That's
you know,
okay, yeah, right, because that's what they were, mentioning. I knew that had been the way when I was at the Y, and then yesterday they reiterated the fact that yes, there's more
but
per
it's
capita.
it's not a competitive atmosphere.
That's the amazing
it's a
part.
collaborative
Exactly right.
atmosphere.
It's so supportive and encouraging, and certainly to address the the depression side of all of these different things. Any one of those nonprofits that was there deals with that aspect too. So what can we do, and what resources can we put out there that just overlap and can accommodate so many different people and groups?
Couldn't
I
agree
can't wait to
more.
get together again.
Great.
Okay. All right.
Thank you,
Shake your
Jan.
hand one
Really
more time.
appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much.